From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
3 more states prepare to join the parade of income tax cutters as the New York City Transit Union blocks a plan to rearrange subway schedules for post-COVID traffic patterns. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleague on the editorial board, Monet Ukwe-Barua. Welcome to you, Monet. The remarkable run for state tax cutters over the past few years is only getting more remarkable, it seems. And let's start with West Virginia, where the state has recently passed a tax cut plan that doesn't go quite as far as the original proposed by Governor Jim Justice, but still seems a step forward for the state's business climate and certainly personal pocketbooks. And so, Monet, give us a sense of what the governor proposed there and what the state legislature ultimately has enacted.
Yes, so the final version, which has come out of a compromise, which I'll get to in a bit, is going to reduce the top rate on income taxes from 6.5% today to 5.12%, so about a 20% reduction. And that goes quite a long way, because if you look at the states in West Virginia's neighborhood, all of them are well below 6%, or rather, I believe Virginia is close to that at 5.75. But some of the other bordering states, Maryland, etc., have lower rates than West Virginia. And so this is about competing, about making sure that the playing field stays competitive for West Virginia's business climate. Jim Justice, as you mentioned, the governor of West Virginia, had originally wanted to go a bit further. The plan that he proposed, and which was passed by the state house, would have cut the rate in half to 3.25%. And yet there was some resistance to that in the state Senate. Both the Senate president and the leader of the Finance Committee believed that it was too drastic of a cut, that it would lead to revenue shortfalls in coming years. And so they passed their own plan, which had an even smaller cut than what was eventually agreed to in the compromise. But basically, I think that West Virginia residents should still be pleased that their state has joined, as you said, the growing club of states that are reducing their rates. And there definitely is a possibility that there will be subsequent moves to further reduce that rate in the future.
The other political angle that I think is interesting here, specifically in West Virginia, is remember that 2024 is a Senate election, and one of the guys who may be on the ballot is Democratic Senator Joe Manchin. And one of the names, one of the Republicans that has been floated as a potential challenger to Joe Manchin is one Governor Jim Justice. Last month, there was a poll by the Terrence Group commissioned by the Senate Leadership Fund. That's a Republican super PAC aligned with Senate Leader Mitch McConnell. And it says that there are 3 hypothetical matchups they tested between Manchin and potential Republican challengers. Justice was the only GOP challenger listed who won more support than Manchin among likely registered voters. And so Monet, as I think Jim Justice has said, he is potentially interested in taking on Manchin and running for that Senate seat. And it seems to me this would be a feather in his cap, not only that he got some tax reform done and lowered rates for people in his state, but also he can say, and listen, I wanted to go further. I wanted to go further than the legislature ultimately went. And so he's, showing his hand, showing where his ideological convictions on this matter of taxing and spending really lie.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a lot of truth to that. Jim Justice, accomplished businessman, similar to Joe Manchin, certainly understands the value of having a competitive tax climate for its own sake. And I definitely believe that he sees the direction that the mining industry is going in his state and wants to put the state in a position to diversify its industries, bring in more types of business, and not be entirely dependent on mining and the severance taxes which have funded government so far. So that's just the case for the tax cuts on the merits. But the political appeal is important, both in a simple way, in that kind of the move will be very popular among West Virginia residents. He had tried in previous years to get a tax cut, but wasn't able to get buy-in from the legislature. And so having that accomplishment to potentially run on if he decides to challenge Joe Manchin will be a huge benefit. But specifically, the issue of taxes and spending is something that he would be able to directly challenge Manchin on. Those polls, I'm not surprised to see that in some of these theoretical polls, Joe Manchin does have a big lead on some hypothetical Republican challengers because he's built a pretty impressive brand in West Virginia, and people know him as someone who is willing to defend the oil and gas industries, who generally has the interests of West Virginians at heart and is willing to fight his own party in certain cases in Congress. But one of the areas where he's been very reluctant to fight his own party is on taxes and spending. Generally, he doesn't have a hard time signing off on large increases, particularly in personal taxation, but also corporate taxes in some cases. And he's gotten well behind things like the Inflation Reduction Act in the end that added trillions of dollars worth of spending to the federal deficit. And so Jim Justice wants to think, hey, what are the issues that I can actually draw a meaningful contrast with Joe Manchin on? And saying that he is a champion of low taxation is something that's going to appeal to an overwhelmingly Republican state and show that he would be a better advocate for that cause in Congress than Joe Manchin has been.
Let's move to a second state that might be moving to cut income taxes as well. That's North Dakota. Right now, there are 5 income tax brackets in North Dakota, starting at 1.1% and going to 2.9%. But recently there were 3 bills that passed the state house. A couple of them are competing, and then a third is an addition. The competing ones, one would assign a flat tax of 1.99%, so just under 2%. A second would be a flat tax of 1.5%. And then a third would lower the income tax rate by half a percentage point every couple of years as long as the state kept hitting its revenue projections. Let's listen to a clip of Republican Governor Doug Burgum. This is from a legislative hearing a couple months ago. He's endorsing the 1.5% flat tax plan.
This would put us on a path towards eventually zeroing out our individual income tax and joining the 8 states that don't have individual income tax. The list of states that don't have individual income tax will continue to grow in this competitive workforce environment we're in. But it's important, it's not just any 8 states. It's 8 states that we compete with directly. We compete for energy workers. Alaska, Texas, and Wyoming are 3 of those 8 states that already have zero income tax. And of course, our neighbor right next to us in South Dakota has zero income tax. And of course, this is important because if we get more workers here driving our industries forward, that's what keeps driving the record revenue that's coming into our state.
One thing I should also mention about this 1.5% flat tax is it would exempt any income for singles up to about $45,000 and for couples up to about $75,000. So something like 60% of taxpayers would owe nothing straight off the bat, and then for the rest of them it could potentially step down to zero. But one thing, Monet, that I thought was interesting about what Governor Burgum said there was he clearly sees this as a competition. And part of that is something you mentioned earlier, states in the neighborhood. South Dakota is one of those states with no income tax. And so there may be people who are deciding down there which side of the border that they want to live on. And some of them may pick that they want to live in South Dakota because they don't get taxed in South Dakota on the income that they make. But he also recognizes that this is a broader competition. The workforce in the United States is incredibly mobile, especially in industries like one that has been huge in North Dakota, which is the oil business. North Dakota needs those oil workers to want to come work in North Dakota instead of Alaska or Texas or Wyoming. So this is really a nationwide tax competition that these states are in.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think over the past 15 or so years that we've really seen the shale boom, there has been a massive workforce of Americans who do travel across state lines, and also migrant workers, sometimes permanent migrants coming to the United States, and they have an opportunity to go work in the oil and gas industry in a huge variety of places. And for those workers, those difference in the tax rate could add up to a pretty significant percentage of what they're able to take home. And so in the aggregate, you will see that affect the decisions that these workers make, and it's to the benefit of North Dakota's oil and gas industry that they're able to lower the cost against the take-home pay of workers who are seeking to enter that industry. But yeah, the tax competition really is one of the main factors driving not just the zero tax states that Doug Burgum mentioned, but several other states that have reduced their tax rates within the past few years to do so. And there's been an increasing rate of interstate migration among Americans over the past years, and the cost of living is one of the biggest features there. And so he has a lot of recent evidence to point to in making the decision to pursue the flat tax at a lower rate.
A third state where residents might get an income tax here shortly is Michigan. And Monet, can you give us a sense of what is going on there and where the rates might go?
Yeah, so listeners might be a bit surprised to hear that Michigan is among the states looking to reduce its tax rates because it has a Democratic governor and slim Democratic majorities in both chambers of its legislature. The reason why a tax cut is now proceeding is because it happened automatically because of a statutory provision. So it's not a new cut being passed directly by the legislature. Rather, they have a bill or a law from 2015 which mandates that the rate will reduce automatically when the general fund grows faster than inflation, plus a certain benchmark. And so the first year that law was active was actually 2023. And Michigan, like a lot of states, has seen pretty big growth in its general fund because of pandemic aid, because of certain increases during the economic rebound over the past couple of years. And so they have a surplus of about $9 billion last year, and that led to an automatic decrease in the income tax rate. Governor Gretchen Whitmer preferred not to see this new lowered rate come to pass, and so she tried to work with Democrats in this legislature to find ways to actually reduce the general fund in a way that would keep their tax rate at a flat 4.5%. The first thing they tried was to funnel some spending towards essentially a slush fund, which is called SOAR, that they use to offer tax incentives to corporations, but Governor Whitmer wasn't able to get support for that. The next thing they tried was cash rebates, basically giving one-time payments of $180 to all residents, or rather all taxpayers, and they weren't able to get enough support to pass that with the backdating that they would need to change the standing of the state's general fund. And so in the end, the governor threw up her hands and agreed to let the income tax reduction move forward. But it just shows you how different the thinking is among Democrats and Republicans, how we've had so many states pursuing rate cuts and pursuing flat taxes within the past couple years, and then Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, even when she was handed the opportunity to do so by the statutory provision, basically trying everything in her power to see if she could stop it.